Welcome to Listenwise News Bites, where you can hear stories from the news that are specially selected for young listeners. Listenwise is an award-winning online listening skill-building resource used by teachers. We have a curated collection of more than 2,000 podcasts from sources such as NPR and other producers of high-quality audio storytelling. In this episode, after closing schools to protect ourselves from COVID-19, many of you are probably wondering, when will we go back to school? And what will going back to school look like in the fall? This story explores those questions.
More than 40 states have said that schools should remain closed for the remainder of the academic year. That leaves families wondering, what about next fall? State and federal authorities have started to outline plans to reopen schools as safely as possible. But as NPR's Anya Kamenetz reports, there are far more unknowns than guarantees.
Teachers and parents are beyond ready for kids to go back to school. But that can't happen without answering one big question.
Is it safe and healthy for my kids?
Lily Eskelsen Garcia is the president of the National Education Association, the nation's largest educators union. And she says she's concerned not only for the health of children, but also for the health of her members. In New York City alone, more than 60 educators have reportedly died from coronavirus.
The doctors say 39 sweaty bodies in a classroom is not healthy and safe. By the way, it never was. But in this case, it might spread an infection that kills people.
Other countries that have started to open up their schools are taking measures like radically smaller class sizes, younger grades only, frequent cleaning, and strict social distancing. Denmark, for example, reopened its schools on April 15th after 4 weeks of closure. At the Copenhagen International School, there are only 5 children allowed on the playground at a time. Ida Storm Janssen, the school's communication director, says they have made up a new game to play while staying 6 feet apart.
Shadow tag, like tagging each other's shadows so they're not touching. And kids are creative. They figure out ways to do things.
There is no such thing as safe reopening.
Maria Litvinova is a researcher at the Institute for Scientific Interchange in Turin, Italy. She's modeled how school closures reduce the spread of illness. She says that the hard part with COVID-19 is that many children don't become ill. But we don't know yet whether they could be spreading the disease without showing any symptoms. So without regular testing, says Litvinova, the best you can do is try to reduce the number of contacts between students.
Whatever you do to make it less people together, the better it is.
In many school districts in the United States, overcrowded classrooms are the norm. Keeping students apart probably means staggering school schedules, like 1 week on, 1 week off, or Monday, Wednesday, Friday, followed by Tuesday, Thursday. That, in turn, probably means continuing distance learning programs in parallel with classroom activities. Finally, schools have to be prepared to close again if and when infections rise.
There's no research to point to here. There's no best practice. This is all going to be very new.
Stephen Pruitt is with the Southern Regional Education Board, which represents 16 southern states from Delaware to Texas. They've set up a task force to help coordinate school reopening. Pruitt says the to-do list is a long one, from extending schedules into the summer to testing kids to see how much learning they've lost, and to wrapping them in extra support from mental health to services like food and housing help.
The restart is going to be critical. The idea that we can come into school in August and September and do things as we've always done, it's not even feasible.
And all of this radical transformation, Pruitt says, will quite likely have to happen with less money than before because of the coronavirus-related recession and its impact on state and local budgets. Anya Kamenetz, NPR News.
There still aren't many answers to what going to school will be like in the fall. So much is still unknown. What do you think schools can do to keep students safe? Next, because the coronavirus spreads through close contact, it means we can no longer say hello with a high five, a hug, or a handshake. This story from NPR starts with a comment from the nation's top infectious disease doctor who thinks we should give up the handshake for good.
The handshake is dead.
Well, that's according to Dr. Anthony Fauci. Last week he said he wants 2 things to continue, even after the pandemic. One is hand washing.
The other one is you don't ever shake anybody's hands. That's clear.
Ever. Thankfully, there is still the oh-so-popular elbow bump, right?
Not so fast, says Dr. Andrew Maley. He's a professor of microbiology and immunology at the University of Wisconsin.
If you're close enough to elbow bump, you're close enough to transmit.
So where does that leave us? We've been pumping hands our whole lives. Some historians say ancient Greeks introduced the handshake. Others point to medieval times. Either way, from its earliest days, the handshake was a symbol of peace.
When two people would meet each other for the first time, they would shake hands to make sure they weren't concealing any weapons.
Brooklyn writer and teacher Alana Rabinowitz admits this peaceful gesture seems more like a suspicious gesture to her.
Which is kind of ironic, right?
Rabinowitz wrote this week in Yes magazine that she's relieved it may be time to retire the traditional greeting.
I know that various people, especially men, I think are quite comfortable with the handshake, and it has embedded in it this background of professionalism and an introduction. But for me, it's always an awkward way to greet someone. I have those clammy hands that I always have to apologize for.
And she says it's kind of an awkward way to meet.
It seems to me like a power struggle. I'm a strong woman, but I have weak hands. So that comes out, and I don't want that in my introduction to someone. I want something else as a way to initially meet someone.
Well, keep in mind, the handshake wasn't always common protocol in the U.S. Writer and editor Ed Simon points to the earliest days in American history.
In the colonial era, handshakes were not necessarily the de facto way of greeting somebody. George Washington preferred bowing. In the 18th and into the 19th century, handshakes were popularized by Quakers.
That's because Quakers believe people should meet on equal footing. So, an alternative that promotes equality but keeps germs at bay? Well, here's what Professor Tulasi Srinivas advises.
Placing the two palms of the hands together and placing it near your heart and bowing the head slightly.
By the way, she's the author of The Cow in the Elevator, an anthropology of wonder. And she favors the namaste greeting, which she says has an added benefit these days.
The fact that you can do the gesture without even saying the word is useful if you're wearing a mask or if you fear that your breath might carry contagion.
Too egalitarian? Well, you could always try out your best Queen of England reviewing a parade gesture and give a greeting with a wavy, circular wave.
Yes, and be sure to do it from the wrist and preferably from a balcony or a horse-drawn carriage.
I didn't know the handshake was used as a greeting for hundreds of years. I know I'll want to avoid touching people when I say hello for a while and will not be going back to shaking hands. Maybe instead I'll just nod and smile. What are some of the new ways you might say hello to a friend that don't involve touching? And now it's time for some weird news. Do you have a dog? Do they get lonely when you leave them home alone? Here's a new solution.
Good morning, I'm Noelle King. Do you ever feel bad about leaving Spot home alone? Well, Spotify has something that might ease your guilt.
Hello, you.
My dog's favorite podcast features dog-directed praise and stories from actors like Ralph Ineson, along with soothing sounds and relaxing music. Spotify says if your pet listens, they may bark less and sleep more. And who doesn't want that?
You really are the best dog in the whole wide world.
Thanks to our partner NPR and to Scott Holmes for our theme music. That's it for the Listenwise News Bites podcast this week. For more stories from the news selected for young listeners, go to www.listenwise.com and sign up for free. And subscribe to this podcast for our weekly shows. Happy listening.